How's it going, guys? I'm Justin. Welcome to Extension 18. The story you're about to witness follows a hard-working waitress that's just trying to get by. It's not easy waiting tables, especially when you have no clue who or what is going to walk through that door and be seated in your section. Before we embark on this terrifying journey, make sure to like and subscribe for more dark tales just like this one. Also, don't forget to click that notification bell so you can stay current with all of our newest content as soon as it's uploaded. The last customer. Gina was beat. She just worked a double shift at the diner where she had been a waitress for the last 2 years. When she first graduated from college, she thought she would immediately find a job, but sadly, nobody wanted to hire a 23-year-old fine arts major. At least, nobody around here. She felt like she worked constantly, at least 10 to 12 hours a day with only 1 day off a week. She had to make her overpriced apartment rent somehow, and if things weren't hard enough already, she had to repay all of her student loans that were starting to pile up. Gina seemed to like her job most days, but today was unlike any other. Her replacement had called in sick, and since the 24-hour diner was already understaffed, her boss wanted her to stay for the next shift. That would literally be 3 shifts in a row. Both her and her boss knew that was definitely illegal. She told him that she had been on her feet for the last 17 hours, and that she'd even worked through her lunch hour and all of her breaks. He bribed her that she could have the next 2 days off if she stayed. Gina knew it was wrong, but she obliged her boss anyways. As the night went on, most customers were nice and polite, but tonight she had the rudest man in her section, quite possibly the rudest man she had ever encountered. Every time she would go to check on him to see if he needed anything, he would say something to belittle her or even criticize how she looked. At one point, he told her that she looked like an old goblin. That was definitely a new one for her. Although Gina had been called worse before, she was too exhausted to be dealing with that kind of negativity. She left the man alone for as long as she could before she had to give him the check. As she walked towards him, there seemed to be something not right with the music on the loudspeaker. It began to gain interference the closer she got to him. When she arrived at his table, an eerie old melody began to play. When she placed the check on the table, he grabbed her wrist. She looked down and saw a sinister smile on his face. He complained that the food was awful, and that it was her fault that he was still hungry. She yanked her wrist free and walked away. The dark song then stopped and the original music came back to the forefront. Immediately, she told her boss what had happened, so he decided to collect the check himself. Her boss said that he had a very pleasant conversation and that the man seemed nice enough to him. The creepy guy even gave Gina a $10 tip, which made no sense. After Gina's shift was finally over, she couldn't help but think about that man and his devilish grin as she walked down the deserted city street. She also couldn't seem to shake that strange tune from playing over and over again in her head. Why would he treat her so badly only to give her such a generous tip? Her apartment was only 2 more blocks away, and she couldn't wait to get out of her uniform and lay down. That's when she heard it. There was someone walking behind her. Normally, Gina doesn't scare very easily and is always very conscious of her surroundings. But for some reason, she hadn't noticed this person or whatever it was until they were too close for comfort. She chalked it up to the hard day's work. She turned around again. There was still no one there. She knew that she heard the scrape of a shoe on the concrete only a few feet away. When she looked back in front of her, she heard the sound again. She started to move a little faster. With every pace increase, the sound of the footsteps behind her grew closer and closer. By the time that Gina got to her apartment complex, she was almost running, and so were the invisible footsteps that followed. She pulled out her keys, and as she turned her head for a split second, still, nobody was there. She put the key into the deadbolt and turned it fast, forcing the door open just as the mysterious steps made their way to the threshold. She ran in as fast as she could, closed and locked the door. She leaned up against her apartment wall and sighed in relief. She had made it home and contemplated calling the cops. But what would she say? An invisible person just chased her through the streets? They would think she was crazy. Maybe she was crazy. Gina tried to put the event out of her mind and get ready for bed. As she took a shower, she felt as though someone was watching her. She even felt uncomfortable in her bedroom as she put on her pajamas. Gina had just crawled into bed when she heard a noise in her kitchen. Her heart immediately jumped. All she could think was that someone had broken in. She grabbed her metal bat that was always beside her bed and turned on the hall light. She walked slowly down the corridor and to the kitchen, where she threw on the light only to find nothing. There wasn't anything in the kitchen, nothing in the living room, and not a soul in the bathroom or the hall closet. When she was satisfied that the apartment had been checked and made sure all of the locks on the front and back door were secured, she walked back to her bedroom, turning all of the lights off as she went. When she reached the end of the hallway, she noticed that her bedroom light was on and the door was shut. She didn't remember turning her bedroom light on at all. She pulled the heavy bat up to a hitting position as she gained the confidence to turn the doorknob. She then swiftly threw open the door. Gina screamed in terror as she saw the rude man from the diner sitting on her bed, eating a bright red apple. He turned to look at her and that sinister smile slid back on his face. But this time, it was different. His teeth weren't the blunted teeth of a human, but the sharp, angled teeth of a monster. With a sudden click, the radio on her dresser turned on by itself, emitting the same eerie song from the diner. As Gina stared at him, frozen with fear, his skin began to turn an inhumanly black. His eyes faded from blue to all white, and his hair sloughed off of his head. Horns began to grow from his forehead and curve above him. His fingers, legs, and arms began to elongate, making him disproportionately lengthy. The demon stood up beside the bed, Gina still frozen to the spot. He lunged at her and the bat made contact with his head, but the blow didn't even seem to bother him. He grabbed her by her arms and began shaking her. The metal bat dropped and Gina wriggled loosely like a rag doll. He opened his mouth as wide as a boa constrictor would eat a large animal and placed her whole head inside. Just as he was about to bite down, Gina let out a terrible scream, only to be silenced by a final crunch. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this story as much as I did bringing it to life. If you've ever had any terrifying customer experiences, let me know about it in the comments section below. Anyways, thanks a bunch, and I'll see you again in the darkest depths of Extension 18.